The moment I saw it, my heart stopped. The ticket in my hand, plain, small, ordinary, had just changed everything. 1, 2, 3. The numbers matched. $1 million. My chest felt tight, my mind spinning. This was impossible. I looked up from the ticket. My sister was standing there, her eyes wide. I thought she'd share my excitement. I thought she'd laugh, maybe hug me. But she didn't. Her smile was sharp, quick, calculating. It vanished before I could register it. "Did you really just win? $1 million?" she asked, voice light, but her eyes unreadable. I nodded, trembling, barely believing my own words. Around us, the family chatter carried on. Laughter, clinking glasses, the smell of fresh pie and roasted chicken filling the room. Everything looked the same, just another ordinary family party. But it wasn't ordinary anymore. Not for me. Not after this. I tucked the ticket in my pocket, deciding to wait until later to celebrate. But when I turned, she wasn't there. I blinked, confused. Then panic seeped in. I reached for the ticket. It was gone. My hands went cold. I scanned the room. Cousins were talking, kids were running, my mom was pouring tea. Everyone was absorbed in their own world. Everyone but me. I realized it before I'd even wanted to. My sister had taken it. Shock slammed into me. Not like anger, not yet. Just disbelief. My sister, my closest ally, gone. And with her, my chance at a life-changing win. I remembered the morning, the sunlight streaming through the window, the way she laughed at my bad jokes, the smell of coffee, the feeling of normal. And now all of that felt distant, almost unreal. Everything I had known about this night had shifted in seconds. I wanted to call out, to scream, to demand she return it. But I didn't. I couldn't. My voice faltered. My emotions tangled. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, feeling the betrayal settle like a weight in my chest. Outside, the party carried on. I watched from the edge of the room as my sister slipped away, her figure merging with the shadows of the hallway. My ticket, my future, my trust, all gone in a heartbeat. I thought about what this meant, about trust, about family, about how one small choice could reveal the truth behind smiles and greetings, the truth I hadn't wanted to see. I clenched my fists, not in anger, not yet, but in determination. I would find a way to uncover the truth. I would make this right, not through confrontation, not through cruelty, but through patience, through planning, through letting life itself reveal the choices she had made. The room felt smaller, colder now. The laughter that had seemed so comforting minutes ago was distant, a reminder that life had changed in an instant. And I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I slipped outside, the night air sharp and cool. I stared at the darkened driveway, the shadows of trees swaying gently in the breeze. Somewhere out there, she had the ticket. Somewhere out there, the truth was waiting. And I promised myself, quietly but firmly, that when the truth came, it would be undeniable. My sister might have vanished with the ticket, but she had underestimated the resolve of someone who had been wronged, not with anger, but with clarity. The quiet of the night pressed in, but I felt a spark of something stronger. Hope, focus, determination. I would wait, I would watch, and I would make sure the moment of reckoning arrived exactly when it should. The first chapter of the story ended not with screams or confrontation, but with a silent, powerful resolve. The ticket was gone, the betrayal was real, and yet the story wasn't over. It had only just begun. The night stretched long after the party ended. I sat in my room, staring at the empty space where my sister had disappeared. The ticket wasn't just money, it was trust, hope, the bond I thought we had, and now it was gone. I closed my eyes, and the past came rushing back, unbidden. I remembered Saturday mornings when she and I would race to the kitchen for pancakes, syrup dripping down our fingers, laughter filling the small house. "Last one there has to do the dishes," she would shout, her hair bouncing as she ran. "You're cheating," I'd laugh, trying to catch her, arms outstretched. Those mornings felt like forever ago, a world away. And yet, the memory made the ache sharper. Because she hadn't always been like this. Not when we were kids. We were partners, friends, a team that could face anything. I thought about the summer we spent building a treehouse in the backyard. We argued, yes, over measurements and paint colors. But at the end of each day, we'd sit together on the floorboards, proud, sticky with sawdust and glue. "You know," she'd said once, brushing dust off her arms, "I'm glad it's us against the world, not me against you." Her words hit me now with bitter clarity. Because somehow, over time, the bond had shifted. What had been us became a subtle game of comparison, of one-upmanship. Little things, borrowing money without asking, taking the last cookie, keeping secrets, had grown like weeds, and I hadn't noticed the pattern until it hit me in full force tonight. I remembered another moment, the first real sign. She had borrowed my notebook during exam prep and returned it with my study notes scribbled over, some missing entirely. "Oh, I thought you wouldn't mind," she had said, smiling like it was nothing. I had laughed it off, forgiving, thinking it was small, meaningless. But now I saw it differently. Little cracks had been forming for years. I leaned back, letting the flashbacks carry me further. Birthday parties, holidays, school projects. There were times she had quietly undermined me, always with that casual grin. It wasn't malicious at first, just habit. A habit I'd mistaken for harmlessness. And then the $1 million ticket. That was the first time I realized it wasn't just a habit, it was a choice. A clear, deliberate act. She had seen the opportunity and taken it without hesitation, without thought for the bond we once shared. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It had been building all along. But then, just when I was sinking into anger and sadness, my eyes fell on something I had overlooked for years. A small folded piece of paper, tucked into a drawer. My mother's handwriting. I unfolded it carefully. It wasn't money. It wasn't a secret letter about inheritance. It was a note she had written when we were children about how she wanted us to watch out for each other, to trust one another, to grow together instead of apart. It read, "Remember, life is easier when you lift each other up, not push each other down. Family is the bridge, not the wall." The words were simple, but they cut through the chaos in my mind. I realized then that this wasn't just about a ticket or money or even my sister's choices. It was about the history we had shared, the bond that was once strong enough to weather anything. And the loss of that bond stung far more than anything else. I stared at the note for a long moment, thinking about all the small ways that bond had been ignored, forgotten, or taken for granted. And then it hit me. Perhaps there was more to my sister's choices than greed. Perhaps she had her reasons, her fears, her own disappointments I never understood. The discovery didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't bring the ticket back. But it shifted something inside me. The anger was still there, yes, but beneath it was a thread of clarity, a way to see the full picture, to understand the past without letting it consume the future. I folded the note carefully and tucked it into my pocket. Tomorrow, I would begin piecing together the story behind her actions, not with confrontation, but with patience, observation, and understanding. There was truth to uncover, and when it emerged, it would change everything. I lay back on my bed, staring at the ceiling. The night was quiet, the world still, and for the first time since the ticket vanished, I felt a plan taking shape. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. I would find the answers. And when I did, the story of that night, of that ticket, of my sister, would no longer just be a loss. It would be a lesson, a turning point, a step towards justice and understanding. And somewhere out there, the next chapter was waiting.
Morning light spilled through the curtains, soft but insistent. I sat at the edge of my bed, ticketless, yet strangely focused. The betrayal still stung, but the pain had sharpened into purpose. I wasn't angry in the wild way people think of anger. This was quieter, smarter. This was resolve. I thought about every small betrayal, every moment the trust between my sister and me had frayed, and I realized I didn't need to confront her recklessly. I didn't need drama. Justice didn't need yelling or threats. It needed patience, observation, and clever action. I started small. Notes, names, places, patterns. I reviewed conversations, the small slips of her words, her routines. Every detail became a thread I could follow, a map toward understanding what had really happened. Each observation reminded me of her brilliance, the same brilliance that had allowed her to take the ticket so smoothly. But it also revealed her weaknesses, the spaces where honesty and consistency still mattered. I walked through the empty living room, still faintly smelling the pie from last night. The family's laughter and chaos had faded, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I tried to imagine her mind, what she was feeling, and why. It wasn't about money alone. It never had been. It was about fear, opportunity, and the habits she had formed over years. "I didn't mean to hurt you," I murmured aloud, as if speaking my anchorment plan. My voice felt strange in the silence, but I knew it wasn't for her to hear. It was for me. Words sometimes clarified what emotions could not. I decided my first step would be subtle. I would reconnect with the people around her, quietly observe, and gently probe without revealing my knowledge. Patience was my ally. I didn't want revenge that crushed. I wanted a resolution that balanced truth with understanding. I wanted her to see the consequence of choice without harm. Hours passed. I cataloged everything I knew, the party, her movements, her subtle reactions when anyone mentioned luck, opportunity, or responsibility. I imagined different ways the ticket could have traveled, different places she might hide it, and what patterns in her behavior might reveal it. The thrill of strategy replaced the ache of betrayal. That evening, I noticed a shift, a small detail, almost invisible, but undeniable. A casual remark she had made during the party, a story about a surprise gift she had given to someone, suddenly seemed connected. Her words offhand then now hinted at where the ticket might be, or at least how she had started to feel the weight of her choice. I didn't act immediately. I waited, watching for her next move. But the air had changed. I felt it in the subtle tension when she spoke to me at breakfast, the careful way she avoided certain topics, the half smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was beginning to sense that the quiet plan I had set in motion was working. By nightfall, I had traced a series of clues, small behaviors, overlooked habits, and indirect hints that connected her to the ticket. Nothing confrontational, nothing aggressive, just observation and reasoning. I felt the thrill of quiet power, the kind that comes not from control over another person, but control over yourself and the story unfolding. And then it happened. A phone call she made, too casual, too hurried. Her voice had that tiny crack, the one that reveals anxiety even when she is trying to hide it. My heart skipped a beat. This was it, a thread, a single point where the path of truth intersected with her awareness. I didn't reach out immediately. I didn't need to. I let the moment breathe, letting her feel the subtle shift I had created. The tension was cinematic, the quiet suspense of two people moving in a circle, one aware, one still blind, each decision echoing without words. As I sat in the glow of my desk lamp, reviewing notes and replaying every detail, I realized something vital. The ticket, the betrayal, the planning, it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, about choices, about learning how to respond with integrity when someone you love makes the wrong call. And she was beginning to see it. The night ended on a charged, almost imperceptible pause. I had all the pieces I needed. The clues aligned. And somewhere out there, my sister sensed the shift, though she didn't yet know the full story. Tomorrow, the next step would be taken, not with anger, not with harsh words, but with clarity, patience, and a moral reckoning that promised resolution. The quiet game had begun, and the first sign that justice, gentle but certain, was on its way had appeared. I found her in the quiet corner of the park the next morning, the one with the old oak tree where we used to play as kids. She was sitting on the bench, her hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing in particular. The air was crisp, the kind that makes you feel both small and alive. I didn't rush to her. I walked slowly, letting the space between us carry its weight. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, steady. "We need to talk." She looked up, startled. There was a flicker of defensiveness in her eyes, quickly replaced by uncertainty. "About the ticket?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "About what happened. About us." She swallowed. For a long moment, there was only the sound of leaves rustling in the wind. Then she spoke, almost a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't think." Her words hung in the air. They weren't an excuse, but a start. I sat down beside her, keeping my tone calm. "I know you didn't, but it hurt. Not because of the money, not really. Because I trusted you. Because I believed in us." She looked down, fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "I know. I guess I got caught up in the moment. I thought I could handle it, but I shouldn't have taken it. I didn't think about how it would feel for you." Her admission struck me more than anger ever could. This was not a shouting match. This was truth spilling out slowly, like sunlight through clouds. And in that moment, I realized how much both of us had changed, how much we had grown since those carefree mornings in the kitchen. I remember when we built the treehouse. We were a team then. We trusted each other completely. And somewhere along the way, that trust got broken. Not overnight, but piece by piece. She nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. "I didn't realize it until now, how much I've hurt you, how careless I've been." The wind shifted and a small branch swayed above us. The world felt larger, yet intimate, like a place where understanding could grow. I could see her regret clearly. It wasn't forced or performative. It was real. And in that moment, I understood something vital. Revenge wasn't about proving her wrong or shaming her. It was about letting the truth settle, letting her see the weight of her actions, and letting both of us heal. "I found some clues," I said softly. "Not to accuse you, but to understand, to see the choices that led here." She swallowed again, nodding. "I was scared. I thought I could make it right on my own, but I just ran. I didn't face it."
I reached out, placing a hand on hers. Running never solves anything. Facing it does. And right now, that's what matters. Facing it together. She looked at me, really looked, and I saw the flicker of something I hadn't expected. Relief. Relief that I wasn't lashing out, that I wasn't turning this into punishment. She finally understood that I had power, yes, but that power came from patience, from clarity, from moral balance. I want to fix this. I don't want to lose us. And just like that, the emotional shift happened. It wasn't dramatic or loud. There was no shouting, no tears spilling onto the ground. It was quieter, but infinitely more powerful. She felt it, and I felt it. The story wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about recognition, about understanding the choices we make and the bonds we risk with them. I nodded slowly. We can fix this, but we need honesty. No more hiding, no more running. Her lips pressed together and she gave a small, almost shy nod. I promise. The wind moved again, carrying leaves across the grass. It felt symbolic, like the past was settling behind us while a new chapter opened. The ticket, the betrayal, the months of doubt, they were all part of a story that had led us to this exact moment. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it arrived in calm conversation, in tears quietly shed and acknowledgement of truth. And sometimes it left both people transformed, stronger and wiser than before. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows on the ground. We sat there in silence, no words needed, each of us processing what had happened. The confrontation wasn't over. There were details to resolve, choices to untangle, but the story had already shifted. And in that shift, we could see the path ahead clearly for the first time. Tomorrow, the next step would come. But tonight, for the first time since the ticket vanished, it felt like we were on the same side again. Not as competitors, not as adversaries, but as siblings who had been tested and were learning to rebuild. We sat on the same park bench, the early morning light warming the tips of the trees. The air was calm, almost sacred, as if the world itself had paused to listen. I turned to her, waiting, and she finally began to speak. "I need to tell you everything," she said, voice steady but quiet. "It wasn't about stealing from you. It started before the party, before the ticket even existed." I listened. Her words were measured, careful, revealing a side of her I hadn't known. She explained the pressures she'd been under, the worries she hadn't shared with anyone. Money had been tight for her in ways I hadn't seen. She had thought she could quietly use the ticket to solve her problems, return it before anyone noticed, and everything would be fine. "I thought I could manage it on my own," she said. "I didn't want to burden you. I didn't want to disappoint you, but I misjudged it, and I hurt you instead." Her eyes glistened. She wasn't making excuses. She was revealing truth, raw and human. It hit me differently than I expected. The anger I had felt, the ache of betrayal, shifted into understanding. I could see the fear that had driven her choices, the misstep that had shattered trust. I never imagined you'd lie to me," I said softly, "or take something so important without a word. But hearing this, it's not what I expected. You were scared. You wanted to protect yourself, in your own way." Her head bowed. "I know it was selfish. I see that now. I wasn't thinking about us, about trust. I just acted." I leaned back, taking a deep breath. I realized then that the story of the ticket had been more than money. It was about choices, about how fear can make people act in ways they'll regret. And it was about the bond between us, what we had lost, what we still had a chance to save. "I want you to know something," I said, keeping my tone calm. I don't want revenge. That doesn't solve anything. But I need honesty from now on. Complete honesty. She nodded, relief flickering in her eyes. I can do that, I promise. No more hiding, no more running. We sat in silence, letting the words settle. The tension faded, replaced by a new weight, the understanding of consequences. She had learned that actions have impact, that trust isn't something to take lightly. And I had learned that forgiveness is not weakness, but strength. I lost more than just the ticket, I admitted. I lost trust. The ease of knowing I could count on you. That's harder to rebuild than money. She reached out tentatively, her hand hovering near mine. I'll earn it back, she whispered. I'll do whatever it takes. I looked at her and considered the moral choice before me. I could dwell on what had been taken. I could let the betrayal define us. Or I could allow this to become a moment of growth, a lesson in integrity and care. I realized that true justice isn't punishment. It's restoring balance, giving both people a chance to be better. I believe you, I said slowly. But this isn't just about belief. It's about action. Show me you mean it. Every day, in little ways, in choices you make. Her eyes glimmered, not with guilt, but with determination. I will, I promise. We sat together for a long while, the quiet of the park holding us in its stillness. The story of the ticket had revealed more than greed or theft. It had revealed character, flaws, and the capacity for growth. Both of us had faced consequences. She had felt the weight of her choices, and I had felt the pain of trust broken. And now the path forward was a delicate one, built on honesty and intention. But even in that quiet, there was a lingering question. I hadn't yet decided the final piece of the story. Would I forgive fully, trust again without hesitation, or would caution remain, a silent reminder of what had been lost? The sun rose higher, spilling light across the grass, highlighting the shadows where the past had lingered. We both knew the answer wasn't immediate. It would take time. But for the first time, the possibility of restoration felt real. And as we left the park together, walking side by side, the question hung in the air, soft, unresolved, but with full hope. What choice would define the next chapter of our lives?
The days that followed were quiet, measured, almost sacred. The tension that had clung to every word, every glance, slowly lifted. With each conversation, each shared smile, the space between my sister and me filled again. Not instantly, not perfectly, but with intention. One afternoon, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea steaming in front of her. The sunlight fell across her face, soft, warm, illuminating the small lines of worry that had appeared in the past months. She looked up as I entered, eyes meeting mine with honesty. "I've thought a lot about what you said," she began, voice soft, steady, about trust, about honesty, about being accountable. I want to live by that. I nodded, feeling the weight of the journey lift from my chest. "It's not easy," I said. "It takes time, but it's possible. We can rebuild, piece by piece." She smiled, a gentle, quiet thing, and I felt a flicker of the bond we once had, the laughter of mornings long ago, the shared secrets of tree houses in summer nights. It had changed, matured, but it was still there, beneath the surface, waiting to grow again. Later that day, I handed me a small envelope, its edges neatly folded, the paper soft under my fingers. She said, "I wrote this for you, to explain everything I couldn't say in words before." I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, simple and heartfelt.
She wrote about fear and mistakes, about choices that led her away from honesty, about the regret she carried for the hurt she had caused. But the letter didn't dwell on guilt or shame. It spoke of understanding, of lessons learned, and of hope that we could move forward together. Reading her words, I felt a quiet release, a sense of closure that went beyond any argument or stolen ticket. The paper was more than ink. It was a bridge, a gesture that said what we both needed to hear, but hadn't been able to speak aloud. I looked up from the letter and met her gaze. There was no need for grand apologies or promises shouted across rooms. The quiet honesty between us was enough. I reached out and took her hand, and she held it back. It was a simple connection, but it carried years of memory, of pain, and now of understanding. Later that day, I went for a walk alone, letting the evening settle around me. The sky was painted with gold and pink, a calm that reminded me of how fragile and precious life can be. I thought about the ticket, the betrayal, the fear and regret, and realized the real treasure wasn't money, it was trust, rebuilt and strengthened. I paused by the old oak tree in the park, the place where so much had shifted for us. I traced the rough bark with my hand, feeling its texture, its permanence. It was a reminder that growth takes time, that roots run deep, and that what seems broken can be healed with patience and care. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, I felt entirely at peace. Not because the past had been erased, but because the truth had been faced and balance had returned. My sister had her own lessons, her own growth. I had mine. And together, we were moving forward, stronger, wiser, and calmer. As I walked home, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in gentle shadows. I felt a quiet satisfaction, not from revenge, not from winning, but justice in its truest form, understanding, reflection, and the choice to forgive without forgetting. That night, I placed her letter on the shelf, where it caught the last light of the day. It was more than paper. It was a symbol of what had been lost, what had been learned, and what we had regained. And as I turned away, I knew the story of the ticket, of trust, and of betrayal had reached its final chapter. The air was still, the world calm, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the quiet power of balance. The truth spoken, the heart healed, and the knowledge that some lessons once learned remain forever. I paused at the doorway, looking back at the room one last time. The letter on the shelf, the fading light, the gentle hum of life moving forward. It said everything I needed to know. Sometimes the most profound justice is not loud or fierce. It is quiet, it is patient, and it leaves a lasting peace. And in that silence, I whispered to myself, everything is finally as it should be.